Okay, we are back on a overcast Friday here in the Denver area. I've got my friend Steve Cooper of EnergyIQ fame, the data management guru, one of them in the oil and gas world. Steve's a good dude for anybody who's met him. And Steve, particularly, I think relevant this week having you on because, as I mentioned, I was out at the Quorum Connections conference in Las Vegas earlier this week at the MGM. They do a really nice job with that show. Probably 1,000 people there, lots of partners, vendors, executives, entrepreneurs. They put together a really good show, and it's fun. This is my third one of these I think that I've been to, all post COVID. They've actually outgrown the MGM, which is crazy to think because it's an absolutely enormous hotel. And they're moving to the Aria next year. So I'm looking forward to see how that changes things. Newer hotel, probably a bigger conference space. But I had a blast. I was there with one of my clients, one of Funk Future's clients, EAG. And your name came up a little bit because, as you know, certainly, Energy IQ was acquired just a little over 5 years ago by Quorum. So there were some of your former colleagues there. But anyways, just wanted to preface this with that.
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. Good to catch up. Yeah, it's a funny thing, but I never got to go to one of those events. We'll probably get into it, but Energy IQ was acquired just before COVID hit, and so the plans were in place for the event, and I had a big role in it. And then I still had to do it, but it was all virtual, so I never got to enjoy the Vegas aspect of it. It was very disappointing. I would have loved to have gone.
You probably could still go. And you'd see a bunch of your old clients there and people that worked for you and worked with you. Um, but I don't know what your schedule dictates if a trip to Las Vegas is in the cards. Maybe next year we go out together. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. You never know. I'd always be up for a trip there.
Yeah, it is fun. I'm like the worst guest for the casino. They see me coming in and they're like, "Oh God, it's you." I don't gamble and I don't drink.
Well,
So
you're
I
not one of
basically
those,
just
you're not one of those people who takes up the penny slots. Then
no, I didn't really have a lot of time while I was there, but these casinos, they're brilliant, right? To get to the elevator, to get to the conference floor, you have to walk through the casino to get there.
oh yeah,
Right. They've got the physics of how this works mapped out. But I spent less, I think, than I typically do on a business trip because, all the meals were paid for. I didn't I didn't drink, I didn't gamble, so my expense report was not that big coming out of Vegas this week, but it was still a good time.
good for you.
Thank you, Steve. Got to hit you with the question that I hit all of my guests right out of the gate: is who are you, man? Who is Steve Cooper?
Wow, there's a question I wasn't ready for. It's probably better to ask other people on that one. But yeah, I could give you a little bit about my background.
Let's hear it
Where I,
all.
so I grew up in England, northwest near Manchester, a town called Bolton. Um, and I actually coming out of school, I was intending to, work for the National Coal Board in Britain.
Okay.
Um, so I took a year off between school and university and went and worked down a coal mine. And that pretty much convinced me I did not want to work down a coal mine as a career. But
Wow.
I still went on and did a mining engineering degree. And and then at the end of that, there was pretty much nothing left of the British coal mining industry because it was right around the time that Thatcher took on the unions, and there's only one winner in that one. And so there was really no jobs left, but it didn't really matter. I didn't want to do it anyway. But I did consider briefly going to work in the South African gold mines, but I had even worse timing because that was around the whole apartheid, and it was a mess. And so you could earn a lot of money down there, but you couldn't actually do anything with it. So
Mm,
I stayed on at Nottingham University, where I'd done my undergraduate and did a postgraduate degree. And it was sponsored by a company in the US, in Colorado. And the deal was, if I did the postgraduate work, I could spend 6 weeks out of the year in Colorado. I was like, that's good enough for me. I'm doing
Sounds
that.
good. Yeah.
So I came out and worked for this company, and what it really did was it was taught me, kind of a crash course in computer science, because it was kind of early days in computer science. We were still dealing with, old languages and that. And so I worked for them for a little bit, and then I got picked up by another company in Colorado, but that was out of Australia. And they were really in the forerunners of the GIS world,
Mm.
so Genesis. And I worked for them for a couple of years, but they were struggling. And at the time they were kind of competing with Esri, but Esri just crushed them, absolutely
Yeah, as they have with everybody in the
pretty much
mapping world,
everybody.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I decided I wanted to kind of get back to something close to what I was used to, but combine the computer science. I ended up going to work for what was petroleum information. So it was more on it was on the oil and gas side, but still, somewhat related to, my background. And so I went into petroleum information, and they got, you know, acquired by IHS and so on. Merged with Dwight's at the time, so probably names that people remember. So when PI and Dwight's merged, um, I had been working, kind of working my way up a little bit at PI, and then, I was made, I think, a vice president or director. And when IHS kind of, we got going, I ended up becoming the CTO or CIO, whichever way you looked at it, of IHS Energy, so the energy division. And so I stayed actually there for like 12 to 14 years. And, a chunk of that as the CIO. But then, IHS went public. Um, and things kind of changed a lot, and I didn't, and I'd always wanted to start my own company. So I decided, I saw an opportunity. PPDM was very big in the oil and gas industry, obviously back then, still relevant today.
Yeah.
But IHS had a version of PPDM called the PIDM that they delivered all the data in,
Okay.
but it wasn't the same. And I felt there was an opportunity to build a data management system on something that was pure PPDM.
Okay.
And so that's what I decided when I decided to start EnergyIQ. And, you know, I mean, the hardest part of that was really trying to work with IHS to load their data. They weren't very keen on that, as you could imagine. And I managed to, talk my way into it and got permission to do that. And then we just started building products on top of the PPM database, and it kind of took off from there. So
Yeah.
that's it.
That's you from a business perspective. So I'm curious. Obviously, you've got the accent. You're from Manchester. In I'm from New Hampshire, where
Yeah.
every town and city in New Hampshire has a name like you do over in England. So I'm from Plymouth, but of
Mm.
course there's a Manchester and there's a Hanover and all of that. We call
York.
Manchester Manch Vegas because
Oh, okay.
that's where everybody would I guess come up from Boston, all these gangsters, and they do their underground poker games and all that. Because in New Hampshire, anything goes, man. There's no tax on anything. The state motto slogan
Yeah.
is live free or die. Um, but yeah, like a lot of the same towns, have sister cities or just the same names over in the UK. So you came over here. Do you have dual citizenship now? Do you ever get back to the UK? It's I've always known you as a Colorado guy, but obviously you still got the accent from back home.
Yeah. If you talk to people back home, they don't think I got the accent. You think
Yeah, they think you lost it.
I
Yeah,
think I'm fully Americanized now. But yeah, so I am a dual citizen. So it was interesting actually because I hadn't really thought about it. But when I was at university, I got a summer job working in New York State
okay.
on a kids' camp, summer
Oh,
camp.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And I had the greatest job in the world. because my job was maintenance, and I was the only person working there with a truck.
Yes,
So
you're popular.
with the weekends where it was time to go to the bars, yeah, I was really popular, and we won't go into that. But I always had a soft spot for America, and then when this opportunity came up, to work in Colorado, I came across one summer. I was like, oh my God, I grew up in a place where, like today, it's like 300 days of gray and miserable
Yeah.
out of the year. Came to Colorado, it's 300 days of sunshine.
Yep.
Like, oh, and you got the mountains and everything. I was like, this is, from day one, it was like, this is where I want to live. It was, just awesome. So it was really, a lot of it was, I've been plenty of other places, but I've always, never wanted to live anywhere else, except maybe Montana, but it's a bit cold. My wife wouldn't go there. So yeah, I just kind of came over here. I loved it, and then I met my wife. She's a Colorado native.
Nice.
We had a couple of kids, and I was still, when I first came across, you couldn't get U.S. citizenship without giving up your own,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and so I didn't do it. So I was on a green card, which
Yeah.
is obviously relevant today, and then one of the elections, I think it was probably around 2008 or so. Um, my girls were asking me, who are you going to vote for? And I said, well, I can't vote. I'm not a citizen. And they're like, there was outrage. It's like, oh my God, people died to get you to vote. You need to become a citizen. So I did. I took the English language test and passed,
Yeah.
fortunately.
Probably wasn't that hard for you.
Not
Um,
very hard, no.
English, maybe your first language.
Yeah, only
Um,
language.
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So then you raise kids. I'm assuming your kids then don't have any accents. Your wife doesn't have an accent.
No, no, no.
Just true Colorado natives. And yeah, you're here. I think you're over on the west side. I'm a little bit on the east side. You introduced me to Woody's, the pizza place, which is a great spot over there in Golden. One of the things that when you first really hit my radar was when I was at Seven Lakes. This was about a dozen years ago, and EnergyIQ was like the de facto player in the data management space. And Seven Lakes was an innovative company. They had visions of grandeur in the data management space. We're building a lot of dashboards and started to build out similar products to what EnergyIQ had. What we quickly realized is it's actually pretty hard, right? You've got to do a lot on the back end to ensure that the data is consistent across all kinds of platforms with different databases. And this is before cloud was really a thing, right? So you're pulling all this into like a SQL database. Somehow you figured it out though. And I think a lot of the challenges that you were solving for are still issues, still challenges in the oil and gas data space. So, I'm curious, like, how did you do that? How'd you figure out that, obviously you understood that there was a major pain point and that companies placed a value on integrated data sets and insights into that data. Was it hard from a technology perspective with the tools that were available to sort of just figure out how to normalize this across multiple systems?
It's a good question, Jeremy. I think, obviously, I'm looking back quite a few years here, so I probably, forget a lot of stuff.
Sure.
But I think it was hard. I don't know it was that hard from a technology perspective. It was really hard from you know, really from understanding how all the bits fit together. And I came in having 12 years working with the data and a reasonable understanding of it. And I still uncovered a lot of really difficult stuff. From a technology perspective, the hardest part back then was the volume of data and speed, because, I mean, you talk about the days where, to buy, a couple of gigabytes will cost you a fortune.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
now you got it on your phone. So that from a technology perspective, we had to do some, we had some smart people who dealt with that. But honestly, the hardest part I found was really making sense of the data you would get. And it didn't really matter whether it came from IHS or, drilling info or from the state. I mean, just the whole concept of well identification was and probably still is brutal. The fact that every state identified wells differently.
Sure.
It'd all be, about the same up to 10 digits, but then the 12th and 14th meant something totally different. And it was crucial because if you're taking logs and, other surveys, wellbore surveys or production data, tying it to the right wellbore should have been simple. And it wasn't, and it isn't.
Yeah,
It's just like, oh my God, it gave me nightmares. And, it was funny because I get teased about this, but I did a project for PPDM called What is a Well?
I remember that.
And you go, what is a well? A well is a hole in the ground. But when you get down to the details of it, nobody could ever agree on what was actually a definition of a well, a wellbore, and a completion. And then the identification of it. So that was the hard part, but that was also the opportunity. And so we spent huge amounts of time developing software to you go through and identify the hierarchy. Okay, this well has this many well bores, this well bore has this many completions and sub completions and so on. And so I think that was really a lot of the intelligence in our system because that made it a master data
Yep.
system. Because if we could identify that, then you could tie into all these other data stores and solutions. And I'm not sure that people really understood how difficult that was and how much work we did in that space. And the guys at Anadarko were phenomenal. Guys like Rick Pruker, working with him to understand this, and a few of the other guys there, they were phenomenal in helping us. But you brought up Seven Lakes. Seven Lakes enraged me at the time. I don't
Sorry,
mind.
sorry about that, Steve.
It was, but I also learned a tremendous amount from it
Yeah.
because, I was looking at Seven Lakes and going, I mean, the guy raised like 20 million or
Yeah.
something. I was like, what? How has he raised 20 million? They haven't done anything. They just got some flash. And that was probably unfair. There was a lot more to it than just flash. But it just taught me a lesson that, the the presentation side is hugely important. So
Yeah.
later on, we put a layer on top of our platform that was based on the elastic data technology. We had a guy working for us, Jimmy Cook, who was just brilliant, and he looked at elastic, pulled all the data into it, and from having a very slow and clunky interface, all of a sudden we could present this data lightning fast
Yep.
and with some super cool tools out of the box, graphing and charting and all of that. So even though, Seven Lakes enraged me, I owe them a debt of gratitude for that because it was a good lesson.
Yeah, it was, I mean, really part of the reason, a big part of the reason why I took the job was because of the flash. Like I went out to California to interview and they started showing me all their stuff and it was beautiful, right? Like whatever group they use to do their, user interface, user experience front end, um, it was just so clean. And I knew that
Yeah,
it was going to show well in meetings. But what it still comes down to is the data quality, the aggregation, having a golden record of a well. Otherwise, it's the whole garbage in, garbage out
yeah,
concept. Those were fun days, and I think that we were focus was probably a bit too bifurcated to truly say, okay, our competitor is Energy IQ. You could say, this company competes with the Merrick suite, right? So you're competing with
yeah,
even in the production field data capture side, but we were selling, the iPad version. They were going to market with, the desktop version. And then there's, analytics and dashboards. Well, you could build this in-house with Spotfire, but have you solved your data challenges? We can build this in HTML5. There was a lot of entry points into a company, right?
yeah,
Where, and that was one of the things that I took from that as a value is, for Energy IQ, I'm guessing, you had champions within the organization that were probably the data centric people.
yeah,
With Seven Lakes, like you can get in through the production side, right? You can get in through the reserves and forecasting side. Maybe the land team needs a dashboard. Then you've got IT with some sort of data project. So you become we would become very immersed in the organization, which I think is what led to a lot of the increase in business sales. And yeah, I think the big lesson, one of the big lessons, is your company's worth what somebody's going to pay for it, right? So if somebody else sees the flash and buys into the story of, okay, your trajectory is high and rapid because people are buying into this flash, I want to be a part of it. And I think that, the unfortunate part of Seven Lakes truly was that downturn in the 2015, 2016 especially, which you've got investors coming in from outside of the patch, and they're just looking at the numbers and saying, my God, okay, you did 4 million, you did a million, you did 5 million, you did 12 million. Well, logically, you should do 20 million next year.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, oil crashes to $26 a barrel, natural gas is in the basement, and you don't. Sales slow down, and you throw more salespeople at it, and that's not the issue. Companies just aren't buying stuff when they're in survival mode. So, yeah, and I'm sorry for the lack of sleep, but we're all trying to feed our families too, right? It's business.
Oh, that's right. I mean, it is interesting. I mean, we had a number of competitors out there.
Yeah.
IHS being one, Petroweb being another. And NeuroDB was another one. If you remember those
Oh
guys,
yeah,
with
I do. Yeah.
and it was always we would compete. I'm also thinking of Petrosys as well with Volker. Remember Volker Hershinger
I do
out of
not.
Adelaide, Australia?
Hmm.
And and I would see these guys. We would compete and we'd fight, but then it was never personal.
No.
Well, there's always once or twice when it comes a bit personal. I mean, for the most part, I can see those guys, and we would have a good chat and a laugh and a beer. But it's
Yeah.
interesting you bring up 2015, 16, because that was about the closest we came to going under. And again, it taught me a
Yeah.
lesson. But fortunately, we were on a tear in 2015.
Yeah, you were.
We jumped a huge amount of revenue, and I always remember it was something like December the 17th. And me and Mike Skeffington, who was running sales, had gone to Oklahoma City uh, to try and close a couple of deals. I think one of them was Devon, and the other one, it wasn't Chesapeake. There's another company that I can't, for the life of me, my memory's gone on who it was. It wasn't. I think they went out of business in the end, but
Okay.
we closed them both on that day because
Nice.
people were really, the oil price had started to go down, and people thought we're not going to get our budget next year.
Better spend it now,
Better
right?
spend it now. So we closed those two. We closed another one. I got to the airport, and the lady who at the time was CIO of BP called me on my phone and said, "Hey, we got this proposal for you. We want to close it." I'm like, okay. And she said, "Can you get us the paperwork tonight?"
Oh my God.
And I was like, and I'm at the airport, and I'm like, yeah, we can do that. And she goes, and we want like a 20% discount. And
Right.
I don't know what made me do it. I said, no discounts
Yeah.
today.
No, too much
And
demand.
she goes, fine, just send it to me. And
Yeah.
we closed that one as well. It was like, oh my God. And, so we're just, we got absolutely wrecked in the bar, and as you would. And,
Yeah.
but then we knew what was coming. And
Yeah.
so, unfortunately, we had to lay about 30% of the people off. We had to cut, because even though, we had this money coming in, everything else was just going to hell. And, we had and it's another lesson. And this is, if I advise companies now, it's like you have to have your Shackleton plan. Have you ever heard the story of Ernest Shackleton?
No.
He sailed, I think it was the Endeavour to try to get to the South Pole, and it
Okay.
got trapped in ice. And it's the most unbelievable survivor story you've ever heard of. They kind of they walked across the ice. They sailed a little boat to some island that was uninhabited and ate seals. And then, anyway, incredible survival story. So we had our Shackleton plan, you know, everything goes to hell. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And we survived and came back. And it was good and bad because it put a few of our competitors out of business, but
Yeah.
it also enabled IHS to catch up.
Ah, right. Because they can deal with downturns, right? I
Yeah,
mean, they're built for that. You as a
yeah,
small company are not. And
no,
I see this as an entrepreneur myself. The most painful part of this business is when I had to lay 3 people off in a period of 2 months last summer, and it was awful. I mean,
yeah,
because these are my friends. When you're a smaller company, you either know these people personally, which is why you brought them on in the first place, or you get to know them and it becomes like part of your family. God, that was painful.
yeah.
But they
It
all
was
understand
the
it.
worst
It's
part.
it's awful. They understand it, right? It's sort of like, I get it. I know you lost a couple clients, revenue's down. There's some uncertainty in the market. Um, Companies pay late, and I'm over here trying to survive myself. My Shackleton plan, right? Transferring money from
Yeah,
my home equity line of credit or taking credit card advances and to make payroll, like that's a real thing, and it's a scary time, but I've said this many times before. My worst day as an entrepreneur is still better than my best day as an employee. But that's me. That might not be the case for everyone else.
no, it's definitely it's something you have to consider, before particularly like you and we had businesses when we had families.
Yeah.
I mean, I started Energy IQ. I think I was like maybe 40, 41.
Yeah.
And my kids were 5 and 3. And it's a big step. And there's definitely days when you go, um, I'm not sure we're going to make it. And you kind of wonder why you did it. And then, when you look back and it turned out well, you go, oh, yeah, that was awesome. I'd do that again. And then I think, no, I'm not doing that again. But, the other thing, I'll tell you a funny story is, I had hired an accountant, and he really wasn't very good because, every time I'd look at the monthly accounts, they were wrong. I would always find errors. It's like, okay, I'm finding these
What
errors.
am I paying you for? I'm doing
Yeah.
your job for you.
So anyway, he went, and I asked my wife to step in and do it. And for anybody who's thinking about starting a business, don't get your wife involved because I mean she was awesome. I mean, she's very very good with numbers, and so. But the problem would be we'd be sitting there at night, and she'd say, "Oh, I'm not sure if we can make payroll next
Oh
month,"
my God.
and then I'd be like, "I can't sleep." Because I'm up pacing around, and stuff like that. It's hard to get away from it, but we stayed married, so it was good.
Yeah. And you'd say, we're going to make payroll. You might not like how, uh, but we're
We'll
going to make
find
it.
a way, It's
Yeah.
yeah,
You've been classified by people in the space as a survivor. And I would classify you as that too, right? You pushed into a space that are big deals, not a ton of deals. So you kind of have to win. Your close rate has to be high.
yeah.
And I maybe it's luck, maybe it's good fortune, maybe it's sort of a combination of opportunity meeting good timing. But your timing is spectacular, right? You close a couple of these deals, 3 of these deals with big companies right before a downturn. But then the ultimate move is selling your company right before COVID.
Oh, I know. It's it is. It's a funny. I was just bizarre, the whole thing. I mean, and it does go back to 2015 because that was the second big downturn. We'd had another one around, just after we got going, 2008, 2009.
Oh,
Remember
that was, yeah,
the whole subprime mortgage thing just tanked everything. I was
totally.
so that was the second. So I said, 2016, I was like, right, if we rebuild this, I'm going to get out. Um,
Smart.
and so around the summer of 2019, I had two sort of minority business partners, Mike Skeffington, Mike Hayden, Skeffington the sales and Hayden development. And I said to them, and we were doing well in 2019. I said, I think the time is right to, start preparing to get out. And it wasn't just the fact that we'd recovered. I felt that IHS was really coming up on us, and
They were.
we hadn't really lost any deals to them prior. But in 2019, we lost a couple of big ones. We lost, I forget who it was, maybe Murphy Oil in Calgary, and another one. And we were still winning some. We had acquired Petroware, but so we got all of their clients as well. So we'd actually grown a lot. We're up to like 50 to 60 employees,
Wow.
and so I felt that it needed a bigger company to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
To really invest, because technology was changing big time. We were still, even though we'd put Elastic on top of everything, and that was phenomenal, we were still under the hood SQL Server database, and you could see the writing on the wall that there needed to be an investment in the technology to take it to the next level, and an investment in the company, the employees. If you get to there's a few inflection points in a business. You get to 10 employees, you can't behave like a sole proprietor anymore.
Yeah.
You get to 30 again, and then 50 is a big change. You've really got to put the structure in place. I just didn't want to do it, and so I felt, okay, now is the right time. So that was middle of 2019, and I kind of knew the companies who would buy us.
Sure.
So I put the prospectus together and put it out there, and it's kind of funny. I think I can say this, but the two who came through the strongest were Quorum,
Hmm.
and then the guys up in Canada, and the name's just gone right out of my head. They both wanted us badly, and I'm thinking, great, I can get a bidding war going on. And then I find out they're both owned by Thoma Bravo.
No, so
Wow.
Aucerna, was that that group?
Ocerna, yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ocerna,
Yep.
yeah, and I actually thought that Ocerna would acquire us, and but then I'm not quite sure what happened behind the scenes, but it was basically, no, it's going to be Quorum who
Yeah, because it
puts
was the
the
same
final bid.
financial. It was ultimately all the same private equity backer, and then those companies got merged together. They're like, wait, we have two companies with similar revenue. We're worth more if they're just together, and there was no product overlap. But your piece was one of the missing pieces, and I think they saw that, right? So
Yeah,
you're like, oh, great, this bidding war that I thought was between two companies is actually the same company.
it's the same company. Yeah, there's no bidding war
So
here.
much for bidding war.
But anyway, we negotiated a deal, and it was very, very fair. I was very happy with it. And So but it takes a long time. So
Yeah.
here we're there at the end of I think 2019, and we get into 2020, and there was some last minute hiccups, and I was like, oh, I got to fight this, and I have an advisor, who I say thank you to him every time. He said, Steve, he said, time kills deals. He
Yep.
said, just suck it up and sign it. I was like, fine, I'll do it. So I did. And we closed on February the 13th, 2020. And
Wow.
COVID was sort of a thing, but nobody had any idea what was coming. And the following week, I went down to Houston to meet everybody and shake hands and all of that, and attend a client event at the Houston baseball place downtown.
Yeah.
And it was the last time I flew for like 2.5 years, I think,
Right.
because
Unreal.
right after that, just all hell broke loose. The oil price went negative. I don't know if you remember that,
How could
but
I forget?
yeah, people were actually paying other people to take oil off the hands at like $30, and then it stabilized a little bit, but I'm not sure we would have survived. So yes, we were unbelievably fortunate with the timing on that.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, time definitely does kill deals, all kinds of deals. It kills relationships too.
Yeah,
But when you're talking about a larger transaction like that, I think your advisor came through in the clutch, and you should be thanking him every time you see him.
I do. I do. He always reminds me of it as well, though. So.
It's like, yeah, you're picking up this round of
Yeah,
golf.
yeah, definitely.
So did you stick around? And what was that like, right? So the deal happens, COVID happens, and I'm assuming there was some sort of like retention, right? Like you got to stick around for a period of time. Was that a thing?
Yeah, yeah. They asked me to stay on for 12 months,
Okay.
and it was totally fine. No problems with it. I found, you know, in the early part, I was still just kind of really doing the same thing,
Yeah.
except I didn't have to deal with finances. That
Beautiful.
was a huge weight off my shoulders. At the end of every month, you look at all the bills, and it's like all of that was gone. I was like, oh my god, this is fabulous. So I loved it, and a little bit like you now, and I loved it because I didn't have to do the stuff I didn't want to do, and I kept things running. But then, they brought somebody in to kind of take over because I had said I'm not going to stay, you know, much, beyond. And so we transitioned things over, and I started getting more into the clean energy space
Okay.
for Quorum. But so I stayed on. Then after the year was up, I stayed on for another 6 months,
Hmm.
like focused on the clean energy space. But what I found, and I think this is common for a lot of people who sold the companies, is people would come to me with problems related to the energy IQ side, and I just felt it wasn't fair to the guy in charge to
For you,
do
yeah.
that. And so in the end, I decided to step aside, and I went and did some consulting work for a friend of mine in London. But then these things tend to suck you in, and so last summer I decided I'm done, and
Step
I
away. Yeah.
I stepped away from that. So, but it was good because it's hard, I think, for people to go. For me, it's hard to go from being full on. Yeah, I couldn't have gone from being full on to doing nothing. And I see people who do that and they struggle with it, And so for
Oh,
me,
absolutely.
it was a good way to wind down over a few years.
Yeah, it makes sense. What are you doing now? So you kind of stepped away from, I guess, what was full time consulting work, whether you expected it to be that or not last summer. What have you been up to in the past 8-9 months?
Well, doing lots of skiing,
There
lots
you
of
go.
fly fishing. I didn't ever expect fly fishing to become a passion, but it has. I was out on the Taylor River yesterday, and I was just, happy as a clam, standing in the river, catching fish, looking around at, incredible scenery. And I've been able to, go to a couple of places like Alaska and New Zealand, and we travel a lot. Um, on the business side, I didn't want to get totally, what I felt was, back to that sort of advisor who helped me unbelievably. And there's been other people over the years. You might remember Mike McCrory, who was CEO of IHS Energy for many
Sure.
years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed away last year from cancer, but he was an advisor for many years. Another guy, John Mattei, been hugely helpful. And I felt, I can do that for companies, so I don't want to just invest in startups and step away. I only want to invest in startups where I can help. And I'm not talking about from, the technology side or anything. It's more from just, the lessons you learn over the years. And, so I created a small LLC, Blue River Investments,
Nice.
just to put some money into startups where I'm interested in the solution, what space is it in? So, I've invested in a sort of a carbon capture tracking company, and a couple of others, one of which is my nephew starting a podcast company. And, I just look for small opportunities where I can help. But it's more about giving, hopefully useful advice, from lessons learned. I'm not going to step in and try to run the company or anything like that. But, so that's what I'm doing.
Well, good for you. And I look forward to the point in my life and career where I'm doing those things. It's not right now, right? This is three young kids that still need to go through college, and I'm mid 40s. I'm in it. right? This is
Yeah.
not the time to be doing that. But hopefully some of these bets that you place, work out and give you an Uber-like return or something. But if not, you have a lot of value to add and impart. Like, what are some of those lessons that you do kind of offer to some of these entrepreneurs who are in it? Like, what are some of those learnings and things that you pass along that you only figured out through your experiences?
Well, I think one of the things I see when I look at business plans is the outrageous optimism on revenue streams.
Yeah,
And it takes a long time. And so you've got to be able to survive. And I don't want to be too down, but it's cash flow that kills people. And you might have a great product, you might have a great company, and cash flow will bring you to your knees. And I like I said, I ran into that around that 2015 time, and it's the stuff you don't expect. So right in the middle of that, I didn't mention this, but at the end of 2015, I had a line of credit with Wells Fargo,
sure.
and they just sent me a note and said, we really don't like this industry. We're calling you line of credit in.
No, oh my God.
Yeah, and you have 30 days.
You got to pay this thing off.
Yeah, but fortunately, I found a local bank who was able to, willing to step in, and they were awesome. And so I stayed with them. Even when Wells Fargo came back and said, "Oh, well, we kind of like that industry now." I said, "Yeah, f you."
Yeah. You had your chance to get my
Yeah,
money and get my
exactly.
interest. Now you don't.
Yeah, yeah, we're done. But so I think it's planning as far as you can for the unexpected. You plan for the happy path, but you got to be prepared for something coming from left field. I mean, we look at the chaos in the markets right now.
Yeah,
Who predicted that? Probably not many people, but you have to be in a position to be able to survive that. And so it's back to that sort of Shackleton plan. So I think that's a very big one, but also recognizing there are ups and downs. Um, so you get down times, and you just kind of strap in and get on with it, and you work your way through it. I think the other thing, for me, is that I've noticed with companies, of people I've known, is not facing up to the truth. So you look and just ignore the fact that I'm going to run out of cash in a couple of months, or something magical is going to happen. Well, magic doesn't happen. So you have to really be on top of the business, understand the financials, understand, um, you know, what's going on, and make your moves early. You can't wait till the last minute. You remember Lehman Brothers that went out of business.
of course.
You know, I forget the name of the guy, but I read the book, and the guy's calling around at the last minute, like Warren Buffett, bail me out. I'll,
Yeah,
give you, say it's too late. You're done. And, obviously much larger scale, but, it illustrates the point. From the technology side, I think, the thing we did a pretty good job of was staying up with technology.
yep.
I was with, IHS for many years, and there was a solution in Canada that just dominated the business, but it was CD based. And it was, you install the software. So, every week they sent out an upgrade, and it was a fantastic solution. Everybody loved it, but it was starting to get old. And we spent years trying to move it to a new platform. Um, and it was a lesson for me with Energy IQ is don't get behind,
Yeah,
stay up with it. And so we invested a lot of money in the development side. And I think a problem for a lot of companies is to get focused on the money, the finances, and increasing revenues and margins every month, and don't want to spend money on stuff that doesn't give an immediate return. And it's a
yeah,
big mistake.
yeah. The working on the business versus in the business is it's hard, and deal with that. And basically, what I've done is just work insane hours where I have, points in the day where I'm working on the business, and during the day I'm working in the business. That is only going to be scalable to a certain extent. And I think we're starting to come up on that point right now, which is pretty exciting. But seeing it a little bit in advance and planning for it has been important. Um, I'm curious, like you've traveled all over the world, right? Why don't you give me some of your favorite cities that you've been to, favorite places that you've been to in the world?
Favorite places? Well, I mean, no surprise, I love London.
It's
I
great,
still
great town.
still have family over there, and I go 2 or 3 times a year just to meet with people, and also just go to the shows and stuff like that. But I am at heart an outdoors person, so I'm in the greatest place for me. With the skiing and the fishing. But over the last few years, something was on my bucket list was to go to Alaska,
Nice.
and that was fabulous. I mean, my wife and I went and spent a week, going to Denali and out to watch the bears and the glaciers, and then I spent a week uh, at a fly fishing camp out in the middle of nowhere,
Wow.
and it was insane. I was fishing on a place called the Brooks River where they always have the pictures of the bears eating the salmon.
Yeah.
So at one point, I'm standing in the middle of the river with a guide. I've got big rainbow trout on my line. I look up, there's like 5 bears around.
Whoa.
I'm like, oh, this is probably not good.
Yeah, but you can have this trout. I'm
Yeah,
just going to move over
yeah. I was
here.
just I was just helping, just bring it in for you, so you don't have to move. But that for anybody who hasn't been up, that was fantastic. And then we just went to New Zealand, and New Zealand is awesome. If I'd have
Yeah.
gone there in my 20s, I'd have probably still been there. You
Yeah.
know, just got
Yeah.
everything down there. And then,
Scenically, it looks spectacular. Yeah. So all right, I'm getting you like a little bit of zen
yeah,
in your current state, and certainly the balance between the big city. London's a huge city, and getting some time outdoors
definitely.
is fun for you. Give me some of your favorite restaurants that you've been to over the years, where you've whether it's Houston or Denver or London or
Yeah.
places like that.
It's a tough question for me because I'm not much of a foodie really, but I do like some of the restaurants in London. There's a great one that's called the Cinnamon Club, and it's
Okay,
in the old Westminster Library. So they've left the library as it is and turned it into a high-end Indian restaurant. So that's awesome. But I'm
nice.
also a big history buff,
Mm,
around World War II and stuff. And so I love going to some of the old clubs in London if I can wangle my way in. So
yeah,
there's the old Army and Navy Club, and they have fantastic restaurants and things like that. But I used to really like Houston. I mean, there's so many restaurants down
it's
there. The food
incredible.
is fantastic down there, and but it's been quite a few years since I've been there, so I kind of forget half the names of them. But yeah, I thought Houston's a tremendous place for restaurants.
Yeah, it is. It's always a highlight when I get there going to new places. You think you're eating something healthy in Houston though, like you order the fish and you realize it's just swimming in butter. Well, all right, maybe not as healthy as you thought, but you do
Yeah,
eat well down there. Steve, this is great, man. I think you told your story well, and certainly a little bit of fortune, but I think that you put yourself in position to take advantage of that. Where can people find you, right? If you're an early stage energy tech company, you're looking for an advisor, possibly an investor, how do people get a hold of Steve Cooper?
but I think the easiest way for people to find me is just to go to LinkedIn and then look up Steve Cooper on Blue River Investments, and I'm sure I'll pop up that way, or people could just shoot me an email as well. So it's just smcooper1963 at gmail.com.
You are not hard to find, my man. Steve, it's been great getting to know you on a personal level, and whether you realize it or not, you've provided some real insight and advisory to me as an entrepreneur. So I can only imagine the value that you do provide to these companies when you're, actively invested in them. So um, thanks for giving back and offering everything you have, and thanks for coming on What the Funk today, my man.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jeremy. It's been fun, and likewise, pleasure to get to know you, and good luck with the future and the changes.
Thank you so much.
All right.